What's up, guys? Welcome to Nerdy Bunch presentation of Back to the Future. We are the collective known as the Cosmic Trio, traversing the space-time continuum, watching movies 20 years or older. I'm your host, English Dave, and helping me overthrow humankind, I'm a brotherhood of evil mutants, Raven, Rocket Mike, and Mercedes. What's up, brotherhood?
Whoa, you just chose my
What up,
side for me?
Dave?
Okay.
Yes, I chose the side for you. You're part of the brotherhood.
Maybe I want my own school.
Maybe.
I mean, you can start your own different school. Bless you. I can see everyone is here themed with X-Men stuff. Mike, you have the entrance to Cerebro as your background. Mercedes, you have the Phoenix logo T-shirt. Raven, you also have the X logo, and is that a X-Men / Deadpool T-shirt?
Deadpool. Right.
It counts X-Men universe, so it still counts. But
you know, him and Wolverine have a rivalry. I gotta keep it going.
None of you guys.
Even though Wolverine is
That's
my
cool.
actual
Bromance.
favorite. I really
Oh,
there it is.
snap.
None of you guys is cool.
Dave is breaking out the big guns.
Throwback.
This guy.
I remember when you got that. I used to have one. That's crazy. There was just no space for it.
Remember
after
that
a
thing.
while. Couldn't justify it.
That's what I say to you guys.
Oh, okay.
Whatever, man.
The scene that got cut when you watched it on TV because it was too risky.
Gotta keep it PG.
Can't put a middle finger up with them claws, man. It's not cool.
If you guys can't tell already, we are here, if you're watching it, by the way, we are here to talk about X-Men, the 2000 film. In a couple weeks from when we're recording this, July 14th, it will be turning 20 years old. How old do you guys all feel? This is like one of the few movies I feel like, in terms of epic childhood movies, that has reached the 20-year-old milestone for us, in terms of our lifetime, right? You know, and you're hard-pressed to find other movies. And yeah, this movie came out July 14th, 2000, on a budget of $75 million, and it would go on to make over $296 million worldwide. That's pretty good. For a movie at the time, comic book movies, especially if you weren't Batman or Superman, nobody cared about this, right? For the longest time, I don't think we had any other movies that weren't Batman or Superman in terms of on the commercial side. We had Blade came out a couple of years earlier, but the Blade was very nuanced, a very niche group, right? It was R-rated as well. It wasn't aiming
Kids
at the
couldn't watch
blockbuster
Blade.
kids.
I did anyway, but we.
Most people didn't know it was a graphic novel. People were like, oh, look at this cool
Let alone
vampire
Marvel.
movie. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know.
I
I
think it
just knew it
was
was
a superhero.
vampires, and I loved vampires. And it was like Wesley Snipes, who was like mad cool when we were kids for whatever reason. I feel like I don't even know what movie he was in before Blade. He was
Until
already-
you
I
found
know,
out
he
he
was
didn't
like-
pay his bills.
Yeah.
This
Poor
movie
guy.
was directed by Bryan Singer and starring Hugh Jackman in his first big high-profile role. Fun fact, fans hated his casting. And, you know, to be fair, he's very different to the description of the character in the comics. The character
Very.
is like 5'0",
He's
husky,
a foot and a half
like,
taller.
broad.
Little did
Ah,
fans
that
know they
makes
got exactly what they
sense now.
needed.
He's got
Yeah,
about half
right.
the hair.
We didn't get the
It's
Wolverine
half
one,
the
but we
body
got the
hair.
one we needed.
Yep.
It was actually
We
ended
did,
up being
but
perfect
also
casting.
when I found out like the other people that were up for casting,
know,
I'm
right?
so glad we ended up with Hugh Jackman. Wow.
That's going to be a
Like,
no for me,
But
dog.
I also realized I was just like, so we never had it. Okay, that's cool. Like I feel a little bit better now. You know, there was never like they were
was
never
never a good
looking for Wolverine like the comics. I think
Right.
like from
I
what
think that
could
was
tell.
it. Bob Hoskins was the first choice to play Wolverine,
Mike,
which I
you
guess
know
what you're
about
saying.
it.
I forget that he's a short guy, like Wolverine is. I'm
Yeah,
like,
he's
okay,
supposed to be like 5'2".
that makes sense. You know,
I mean,
a
he is
Wolverine is
perfect
5
in terms
foot.
of comic book
down,
description.
angry guy. You know,
But
Was the
sometimes
enemy,
you don't
like-
need to get the comic accurate version either.
No.
That doesn't. We shouldn't always get what we want. This also stars in a perfect casting role Patrick Stewart as Professor X. I feel like it had to be. He was born for that role.
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't have been
Perfect.
anybody else.
I literally
Ian
can't
McKellen.
see him as anyone else. Anything else you see him in, you're like Professor X
Professor
is in a
X.
new movie. Wow, that's awesome. Look at Professor X. He's in a drama.
Right.
Like it's just
Right.
always
he's in
Professor X.
space. He's got his own show.
Yeah.
What is this?
I feel like I even call him Sir Professor X sometimes.
Why
Like,
do
I
they
know
keep
he's
calling
Dr.
this
Knight.
dude Patrick? His name is Professor X. Like,
Come on, yo.
What's
Going
wrong?
on?
with
What's
him?
wrong with you?
Also,
20
his
years
best
now.
friend in real life, Ian McKellen, played Magneto.
Yeah.
I felt helped with their
They're
chemistry
super
on screen
besties.
because they're besties in real life. Yes. Famke Janssen as Jean Grey, James Marsden as Scott Summers, Halle Berry as Aurora Monroe Storm, Anna Paquin as Rogue. I didn't like that casting. I did not like that casting.
The last
And
two.
Rogue-
Must be Natalie Portman.
Yes. Tyler Mane as Sabretooth, Ray Park as Toad, Rebecca Murmugen. Rebecca Remain.
Who that?
Rebecca Remain. When she used to be remains Stamos.
Stamos.
She's not anymore. As Mystique, and Bruce
Wow.
Davidson as Senator Kelly. I would say this is a good cast, relatively unknown at the time. I feel like, except for like, oh, that guy's from Star Trek, he was always perfect for it. Like Hugh Jackman, he does musical theater. What?
It's so funny to think like that this guy, ended up doing The Greatest Showman and all those. Because I feel like it's like Wolverine's nightmare. Like some mutant could have trapped him in his
The
brain
exact opposite of him.
and played him as that in his head, and he would have went nuts.
But he comes
Which
from
is the
musical
irony
theater,
is
so
that- That's what I was getting. The irony is that this musical theater guy trapped in a prison called Wolverine, and he escaped.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, Dave's actually right. Raven, I think you got a little backwards.
He's like, I'm free. Yeah, and just hasn't stopped singing since.
I'm trying to say, like, all that Wolverine rage is just him trying to explode out. So every movie he gets
Yeah.
bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger till he exploded into something.
Just want to
Into
dance.
It led to Les Mis.
Into song and flash mob. Just
Yeah.
Yep.
Mike, as we start with our usual, give us some information and background how this movie came to be.
It's only a 12-year story, so if you got some time, I got to really go through it. But it started way back in 1984 when screenwriters of Marvel Comics, Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas, were trying to make a screenplay, but then that ended up falling out. Stan Lee was still in discussions with it, and eventually found James Cameron and his wife at the time, Catherine Bigelow, as you all know, were going to direct it. That was going for a couple of years, and eventually also fell through. And so eventually they went along with the X-Men TV series for Fox. And since that was such a huge hit, they felt like, all right, this is the time when we could start building up that movie again. This was now mid-90s. And eventually Andrew Kevin Walker came up with the script. Characters went in and out. Eventually Beast and Angel was supposed to be in there, but that had to be cut due to budget and length of the film too. There was a whole thing. Magneto was supposed to have something to do with the Chernobyl disaster, and it was supposed to take up like him turning the entire city of Manhattan into mutants and not just world leaders. And as we were talking about before, Hugh Jackman, though he was one of the last to be chosen as Wolverine, actually got the role because eventually with so many bigger names like Bob Hoskins, I mentioned before, was up for it. So many things just didn't work out over the years, but apparently Hugh Jackman had such a great audition that they couldn't help but cast him, even though he was coming from a very opposite musical theater background. I guess he just as you see it, he's a wide range actor.
We're going to how this movie affected us when we were kids. This is one of those few movies that, we either remember when it came out or around the time where it came out, and we have these memories of it. So Raven, I'm going to start with you first. How was this movie when you first came out? How did it feel revisiting it now, and how did you come out of it?
It definitely felt way more action-packed when I was a kid. I remember this movie being like action. Like I remember just being like, whoa, like the fight scenes.
You didn't know what
and,
action was.
Yeah, didn't at all. Because it's not exactly that way. I will definitely say
we have
it's,
Endgame now, so
it's slower now. But I will
that was
say
action. Okay.
because I will say it felt like it felt almost like I did appreciate though that this film kind of did try in terms of story. They were like, let's build some characters here, and I feel like when we were kids, we definitely all identified with the characters. I loved Wolverine. I always loved Wolverine, but I think that it was this movie that really made me, just kind of jump off the edge, and then everything kind of became, ooh, Wolverine. Like, that was the only comics I was interested in, and everything. Wolverine was so cool in this movie. And that was my major thing that I remembered. And then I rewatched this one, and I'm like, I mean, he's cool, but, like, he doesn't, But, the best part was when he's all, does it hurt? Every time. That's a cool part. But,
That is
yeah.
the best part
I
of the
know it. Yeah.
character.
Always
Right?
remember.
That's the best part. It's still like, he's so
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Sensitive.
You don't
This is-
think about
Mike,
that. So,
yeah.
it's little things like that that I do kind of still appreciate, because they did try in terms of character building. Like, you do feel for Wolverine. And I think other films forgot about his hard past. So I think there are certain things that I realize now were more nuanced than I had realized when I was younger. But I also realize some things are a little more corny than others now. But that's just time.
Mike, this is a movie that kind of brought certain characters from cartoons to live action, right? Or from comics. I think a lot of people got introduced to these characters through the 90s cartoon. You brought that up earlier on. So I'm assuming you watched the 90s cartoon. How did it feel for you at the time, seeing that translated on screen?
I had only known X-Men through the cartoon. I didn't really read comics when I was little. I just hadn't been really exposed to them too much. I didn't have any friends that did. My dad had talked about reading them a while ago, so I always kind of thought it was, no offense, an old-fashioned thing at the time. I was a kid. I didn't know better. Yeah.
Same.
But you turn it into a cartoon, you know, all I have to do is just sit there and watch. Easy. Okay. But yeah, I loved the TV show. I think I watched that as much as I was like that, and Spider-Man were the two. Those I knew both because of the cartoon. And so at least I had the cartoon as a reference going into the movie. And seeing it for the first time, I think it was either in theaters or like right when it released on VHS. I got to see it in Blockbuster. And I can say that I didn't know the full background of all the characters. I knew who they were. I knew what their powers were. I knew if they were good or bad. And I think that's really what you need.
Good guy, bad guy.
Yeah. That's all you really need, especially as a kid, to like, all right, now here's the building blocks. We'll take it from here. Now we can have your attention with live action. And movies like this in the early 2000s with X-Men and even the Spider-Man films, these were the building blocks to the superhero movies that we have today. So even though they're not perfect, definitely a little dated, but I think they still stand out, to, at least our attention. I have a bigger appreciation for this one than I did before.
This is one of those movies that, looking back on it, you really see, and it's something that us as X-Men fans in general have always known in terms of, it's a narrative that deals with prejudices, right? It's famously loosely based on the characters, the people, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and the characters of Xavier and Eric. But also with Eric's point of view, it's done through the lens of someone who's survived the Holocaust, right? Who's seen some of the worst that humanity can do. And then on a kind of another nuanced level, something that I didn't realize till later on in my life, is also the gay themes as well. The director, he is gay himself, and the movie itself plays on these kind of themes. He himself famously says that one of the reasons he connected the film, because he had to pick either this or Alien 3 or
Resurrection.
Alien 4. He picked this one. Yeah, there you go.
I think it was Alien.
He picked this one because things like the mutation comes out in puberty, right? And it's almost like coming out, so like he wanted to kind of play on those kind of themes. So Mercedes, having watched the film recently, had you noticed the themes before, or did you notice more now, those themes?
I definitely noticed the themes before. For me, I was definitely introduced through comics through X-Men. My mom is a big comic book nerd, so I found her comic books like growing up as a kid. So I had that reference, and then obviously when you're really little, you can't read everything. So when the 90s the show came out, that was an even bigger like introduction to it. So it definitely, when this came out, I was already like slightly biased to it. Like I already had it in my head that this is going to be the greatest film ever created. Now watching it, I'm like, no, definitely not. And that's one of the reasons why I connected with it, were those themes and nuances. It was something that as a young, Black kid living in a predominantly like white area, it's something that you can definitely connect with, because there are those themes of like, equal but separate. Understand, like, when they put the mutant, camps, do you understand like, wow, that's really a concentration camp, and those things, like how I loved how, even as a kid, I loved how they took something that is so sensitive and so touchy and like hurtful, and actually made it nuanced and kind of fun and more palatable and understandable for a kid and an adult. Obviously I understood that when I got older, but I think that's that's obviously what I loved from it.
I spoke earlier on our podcast how surprisingly it just occurred to me that this movie starts with the point of view of the villain. It opens with understand where he's coming from. So that is one of my favorite moments, that opening with Magneto when he's a kid holding on to the cage and pulling it apart. Raven, I want to ask you, what are some of your favorite moments from this movie?
Oh, so many. Like I said earlier, the part with, Wolverine, when Rogue asks, does it hurt every time? I don't know why that line just always, it's like, ooh.
It's a great line.
Yeah, for some reason. And like those are one of the moments where it's like, okay, you did good. Emphasize that one, sure. But yeah, the also the moment, I don't know why, but whatever the hell Rogue is eating in that car looks delicious in that package. Whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Jerky,
And then like
yeah.
I got older and I was like, yeah, I think that's like some fire beef jerky. It's random, I know, but this is the things I remember.
He probably made it himself.
Yeah. Then what else did I love? I loved any scene with Storm in it. Well, yeah, I loved seeing Cerebro for the first time. First time you see Professor X going to Cerebro. That moment is so epic. I love the way it's visualized.
One epic moment that I feel like not many people talk about, but everyone loves, is when they're doing this, when they're in the plane and they're kind of planning where they're going to go, and you see the 3D hologram with the needle thingies. You know that moment? I was like,
Remind me of the Black Panther
thinking,
tech.
It's overlooked, but that's some really dope tech. Like,
yeah, it's like, ooh,
but
that's nice.
Also, I realized with this movie though, because a lot of it does stand up in terms of just visuals. I feel like it stands up a lot better than a lot of other films from late '90s, early 2000s. And when I was going back and looking in the VFX, a lot of the film is still practical effects. Like most of the scenes that you see Magneto, if he's teleporting something, or even like when he moves the police cars and stuff, the police cars are on 200-foot cranes. So there's only things that they're just emphasized in CG, which I really appreciate about this film. Like Rogue's powers. It was one of the first times that they figured out how to mesh CG with a live object. So you got a lot of like overlays and texture work, which made for like really good CG. You look now and I think that Rogue's powers still stand up. A lot of things that still stand up with this film, or the reason why it still visually looks good, is because we were still in the beginning stages of CG, and a lot of things took so long to be done with CG. Like that one scene where Kelly becomes water. There's like
love that sequence,
30 different texture
That's my favorite.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes.
That's a really dark and deep like death scene too. Like
Right.
I think what
His
touch
whole
what you were saying
storyline is
about
crazy.
like the visual effects. They did a really good job of like as an audience. Like I felt that like when Rogue was touching that kid, like you could literally feel it, like her sucking his soul. And like when when Rogue was like holding not Rogue, Storm was holding Senator Kelly's hand, like. And that happened, like that would be gross.
And I hate moist hands.
Traumatized.
Yeah, that noise.
And this one when he's like, ugh, like
So
that was
nasty.
amazing. Yeah.
I always love the sequence when Sabretooth goes to grab him and he doesn't, and he turns around. He's like to Magneto.
That's like one of the best scenes ever.
There's such a long pause when that happened, and I'm like, this is room to laugh, right? That was fucking hilarious. He's like, oh.
Those
fuck, I
are
gotta
also
turn
my
around.
least favorite
My boss.
scene. Any scene with Sabretooth is my least favorite. He's just a
Tyler
dumbass,
Mane,
and it
completely
upset me.
miscast as Sabretooth.
It upset me so much. Like, even watching it now, I was like, come on, son. Every time they put him on screen, I'm like, look at these eyebrows. I can't.
And the black
The
eyes.
costume
Why-
is stupid.
The black
It's
eyes,
just
too.
I feel
dumb.
like Sabretooth. I feel like
He's
Sabretooth
the
is more like
live cast.
comedic
That's-
relief instead of threat.
Yeah, and
You
that's
know,
the worst
he
thing
didn't feel
about
like a
it.
threat.
Because I feel like as a kid, when if you watch the cartoons, if you play the video games, if you read the comics, whatever reference you had, you were somewhat afraid of Sabretooth. You knew that when Sabretooth was on screen, the heroes were in trouble. You're like, ooh, and and it would build anxiety and stuff. Like, this dude, every time you see him on screen, you're like, Sabretooth. It was just so
Sabretooth is
whack.
supposed to be like, I would say
him
that,
and
I think,
Wolverine have a deep-rooted beef
right?
from like centuries. And that did not show in this film at all.
Yeah, and it was such a mistake to like bring, like, you should have at least had different like not cast members, different heroes like attack Wolverine. But basically, you created this premise that this one dude keeps coming after him, but then never said why.
Never. He's just
Like
obsessive.
never said why.
Like, why
So,
do you
like,
hold on to his dog
The
tag?
only
We know
people that
now.
knew why were the people that knew Marvel Comics. So it's like
Because it's like wink, huh?
Yeah, because like, they could have just straight up not
a
put
lot
him in
of
there, and it wouldn't have
assumption,
made a
like-
difference to the film.
I was very impressed with Rebecca Romijn's Mystique. That was very different from the comics and what we'd seen.
She's
in
one of the
It was
best
really
parts
good
of the
and
movie.
really well done. 'Cause that was
I'll
a
give
lot
that,
of that
the
was
whole
all paint.
transformation. Yep.
It was like
the
a
real paint.
6-hour job every
hours
day.
of
I
paint.
think
8
it took a
hours.
minimum, 8 hours to put on all that makeup, and she's literally being painted with all
Yeah.
those
And then
pieces.
she
But
goes
that's
to
why
work.
it still looks good, you know. And what is it, like stop motion? I guess, like in between makeup. Cause...
I think it's a blend of CGI and prosthetics for the transformation itself. But it always stood out to me her fighting style, like fluid, like a snake. She's kind of like weird when she
it's like
fights
a snake
Wolverine.
cat. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
it's
love
so,
the
like,
fight
graceful.
between her and Wolverine because it's like two
Yeah.
cats almost.
A savage
like
versus
two...
graceful. Any unsung heroes in this film, Mike? Do you have any unsung heroes? Anyone that you didn't watching this again and you realized, oh, I never really paid attention to their narrative before.
Yeah. Stan Lee for being one of the first witnesses
Right?
to the Senator coming out. I didn't notice it. First time
He was
I
like
caught
at a
it.
hot dog stand, right?
I knew all the
I
other
was
Marvel
like,
movies we
oh,
watched.
there
It's
he
so
is.
obvious. But this
That's
one
so
didn't
true.
say anything. It was just a fly over there. You know, it was like, oh,
That's true.
oh, you know.
It's like,
I was literally that
Stan Lee.
Leo DiCaprio meme there. No. Yeah, honestly, besides everyone else being a literal hero, unsung, I gotta throw on to Stanley. That's all.
I would say for me, one of the things I noticed this time around, and it's something that's always bugged me with this film. My biggest issues has always been Marie Rogue. It's always been her narrative, just because I want Rogue to be the
The
Rogue
way you
I
say
know.
it
God
too,
damn it!
Marie.
It's just like it's almost like because they depowered
You mad?
Rogue. I am mad because they depowered her. Rogue is like one of the heavyweights, right? In the cartoon.
Yeah,
in the comics.
true.
And yes, I know
She wasn't doing
that's not her
nothing in
natural
this
state.
film.
Rogue starts off in the comic as a bad guy. She was raised by Mystique, and through circumstance she becomes the good guy. And her narrative is
Wow,
really
that would have been
great because,
so good.
right? It's because like for me, Rogue in this film doesn't really get an arc. It's just the child surrogate.
And just save her.
She's
yeah.
just screaming
Yeah.
the entire movie.
She's just the victim.
Literally
My
screaming.
sort of I think my
She
unsung hero
humanized
for
Wolverine.
like yeah.
Yeah, he's
exactly.
the only one with an arc, right? Really.
Yeah.
They tried to make her
Well, see-
X-23 without saying it.
Yeah,
Like, you
that's what I
know,
was
like-
gonna say too. Though, like my unsung, I think is it might be Kelly, only because like watching it this time around, I feel like he's the one that
He's right.
creates a story in this film too. Because like otherwise, if
all
you got rid
against
of his
him.
character, there is no plot, nothing happened. You know what I'm saying? Like Kelly, I just feel like his whole journey is really interesting because it's the perspective.
Raven, a question for you: does Senator Kelly die? I don't know. That
I
could
mean,
be another.
did you mop him
mutation.
up
So you
and
just
save it?
water,
right?
right? That's the
That's
thing. Did they
true.
save the water? Like.
Oh, just got like a cup, like a mug.
Wow,
Like,
you know what's funny?
They
They really could have just saved. They just left him on the floor too, or just like mopped him up. That's
It was oh.
Like is
gotta
he
do
like
that job.
spread
Stone
out in
was
mad
like- Stone was
pieces
like,
now? But yo, all I could think too was
The
like,
way
if that
she-
was me though, I would be so skeeved out. Like I don't even like no.
Did you see the way she
clean-
dropped his hand though?
Yeah.
She definitely did, like a black
Yeah.
woman. She dropped his hand real
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my other criticisms of this movie is, as much as it's titled X-Men, for me it felt like Wolverine film featuring some X-Men members. It didn't. I think it was a missed opportunity. It didn't feel
Wolverine
like
and
a
his
team
amazing
movie.
friends.
You know what I'm gonna
Right.
say though, on the record, because for me, this is Wolverine Origins. Wolverine Origins
Right.
film don't exist. So if you need to know whatever you need to know about Wolverine,
Just read it.
refer to this film and then move on. Just go to 2 and 3.
Because I feel like
Don't waste your time. Like,
'Cause while I get it,
Origins is horrible.
no, just while I understand it, but just to look at this movie on its own, and especially because I went and watched First Class afterwards, the team X-Men as a team isn't really. We don't know what the team is. We don't really get to pay attention to the team.
That's actually the problem with the film. They got so trapped. They were like, oh, since we're not saving the world, we can just introduce everybody. But then they spent like an hour and a half like introducing one person and then creating this whole like love story, but still explaining only one person. And then there was just that was the missing team. That was the missing thing, teamwork. The fact
'Cause
that
it's
they're
like
supposed
the
to be
other
X-Men.
characters- I feel like the
Like-
other characters get shortchanged. Characters like Cyclops and Jean Grey. Who are they? I don't know. Like if you didn't
That's
know
all
the
right.
comics,
They didn't have examples back then like Avengers.
you know?
Like
know?
Wolverine
Like-
is Mr. Steal Your Girl. Like the other
Like
one
who's
is
Cyclops?
Yeah.
Who's
It's
who's
Mr.
Jean
Steel
Grey? Who are
Girl.
He's Cyclops.
they?
With Johnny
Jean
Cage.
is just there to be the stolen girl.
Mhm.
Just a
Like,
cool
that's all
guy
Jean
with a
is.
bike.
Starring
they play
Stolen
Jean Grey
Girl.
to
Talk
be
my girl.
trifling because like they make Scott look all sad, like like, oh, Jean, I love you.
Yo,
while
they
she's
made
looking over
Scott
at
such
Wolverine.
a wimp in the whole 3 series of these
Can I
films.
tell
like,
you?
this one
That's
and
my
the following
biggest
2.
nitpick. That is my
Uh,
biggest nitpick. What they did to
Because
Scott.
I
'Cause
felt like Scott was never about Jean Grey like that. For that to be his whole story, he don't have nothing else but, oh, Jean. Like, come on,
Yeah.
man.
And he
I used to
was in
look up
love
to
with her,
Scott.
but he still always put the X-Men team first. And it's like this movie,
Yeah.
like, for totally wanted to separate the two and push the romance part.
He was
But like
never
at the
some
end of the
little
day, Scott Summers like is
He's the
like,
leader
of
He's
X-Men.
the man.
He's not Jean Grey's husband, and then he goes to work some days on the weekends with X-Men.
He
like,
does
that's
a
not how
9
it
to
works.
5
Married first.
at Xavier's
You know?
school.
and that's my issue. It's like Scott Summers there's a great kind of father-son narrative with him and Xavier, right? Trying to impress the father. For me, I think especially in film media, Scott has always been given the short end of the stick to kind of help Wolverine's narrative, right?
When we all finally came to see this movie, I feel like all of us got excited to see Cyclops, and then he ended up being just some, lovesick
You actually
wimp, and it was
wanted
kinda
Wolverine
like,
to steal the girl, like in the
Yeah,
TV
which is
show.
weird.
Yeah.
it almost felt like if like the director personally did not like Cyclops' character his whole
Right.
life and was like, he's not cool, I'll show you,
Wolverine
Fuck
should
this
have been
guy.
with Jean Grey in the 90s TV show. The writers got it wrong.
He should have been the leader of the team.
Because I feel like
Like-
in some ways, Cyclops is like Captain America, where they're they're the Boy Scout, but they can be the badass at the same time. Like,
And that's why he's different than Captain America, because that Captain could like take the responsibility of like, this is how strong I am, this is my power, but no matter how strong I am and devastation I can cause, I'm still going to do what I have to do because I need to save people. Cyclops was so afraid of the damage that he could cause, which is why he needed Professor X. That Professor was like, you strong, relax, just do what you have to do. And that was his journey of how he became a leader, because he was like, I'm not afraid of my own power. And that's how, like, he helped Jean. So like, you take that away from him and then make him into this whole, oh, my girlfriend doesn't love me, how am I gonna get her back, don't touch my girlfriend, and then you kill him at a river in the 3rd movie. That's sad.
off screen, by the way.
Yeah, and then you don't even show his death.
Yeah, he gets,
That's what I'm saying.
shortchanged so much. And I think,
For sure.
and also another nitpick I had as a kid, not so much now because I've seen the development of the character through Michael Fassbender, but before this movie, I remember like Magneto, even when he's old man, being like hench, big, like a real tough,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
physical of a guy. So I'm like, watching this movie, I was just like, this old man. No,
Yeah.
as a kid,
There are moments where it's hard to believe, where you're like, "Mwah."
he's an old man.
But like,
There's
what
a
are you
moment
really
where-
doing with that physique if you got metal to do your work for you?
Yeah, it's true.
You don't have to work out at all. Can you imagine what it's like for him to go to the gym? You're like looking at a barbell, like, I don't really have to lift this.
You're like, I can just think this thing up and
It
down.
I could just work my eyes out. There we go.
I found it hilarious. The moment where he just walks out with his cape, he just looked like an old man carrying a cape. It just looked awkward to me.
You know,
He
it's
wore
funny.
this
helmet.
because he's cold.
the movies basically took our sexy buff nerd and gave us the 2000 skinny nerd, because then it turned into Michael Fassbender, who's like the suave, like thin, like this the different type.
I would say that overall, I still enjoy this film. Revisiting it, I would watch
Yeah,
it
it's
again,
still good.
and my future kids will watch it too as a piece of history. You know, this is where we came from, guys.
This is where you came from. Learn your history, kids.
You're gonna be going
Yeah,
to the school, so
before-
pay attention.
Before we had action set pieces every 3 minutes, we had long bouts of characterization. Okay.
We
Right.
had hours
had
of character
look-
building.
Looking longingly at each other in
And then we got
angst.
one good boss fight, and we were happy, okay? Kids were ungrateful.
Barely a boss fight. Magneto barely fights. Like,
Can we
Yeah,
not get
exactly.
into the fight scenes? Because then I'm gonna have to go off on how they did
Can I
Storm
tell you-
dirty. Like you, like, oh god.
Some
At least it
wings.
wasn't like the cartoon where Storm has to say an epic speech before she does something. By the winds of the rain. Like,
Yeah, that was a
remember
little.
the cartoon?
This is very true.
He was very. She was a little preachy back
I
in the
call
day.
upon the power of the wind and the rain to fall upon you.
Do I have
And if you think
rituals,
about it, that's
alright?
slightly
Just,
racist on the TV show's part to be like, oh, what's all black women are preachy before we actually would put work in? What are you trying to say, huh? Huh?
She's trained to be a
Because
minister.
our
That's
church
why.
services along.
Whatever.
I mean, they do see
Maybe
her
I
as a
want to
goddess.
spend my whole
down.
Sunday in church.
Okay.
And can we talk about that stupid wig? I'm glad they got rid of the wig in subsequent movies.
First of
Like-
all, that's actually that's the main disrespectful thing that they did. Like, how do you take the one character in comics that like reps being African? Like everybody knows Storm is from Africa, and you whitewash
They even
this
said she's
shit
from
out.
Africa.
Like you gave her bangs. Like you gave her the whitest hairstyle you could possibly like. Other than
They
the
did.
Karen, like serve the and then actually they did give her the Karen haircut in like the third film. Like you gave this
Yeah,
woman.
she did have like the
Yeah.
housewife hairdo
it-
for sure.
She eventually went to a real short hair and just dyed it white, which she should have done the whole time. Well, this would spawn on many movies and an overly convoluted timeline, which includes prequels and sidequels and
Man,
time
me trying to watch
manipulation
this
and
film in order of like their own
is
timeline,
no
I was like,
order.
okay, so there's like at least 3 films that are completely canceled out. I don't have to watch these, right? Like, okay, well the timeline changed, so I don't have to watch this one, but I do. Wait a minute, like it's so
But I feel
so
like-
confusing.
But I feel like we can't deny the impact this would have on the genre. This is
Oh
definitely
yeah, for sure.
the history of the genre is a pivotal moment.
Well, I think
and a
this
pivotal
movie also
franchise.
showed that comic book movies sell tickets. You know, this
Yes.
film, it was very successful, no, in the box office.
Yep.
Because I feel like this is one of the few movies I actually saw in theaters. I think it came out like 2 weeks before my birthday. So I think I literally went like for my birthday kind of thing. And yeah, this film I think catapulted a lot of, I mean, every film that we see now, all the way up to Endgame, you know?
Yeah. This is the end of part 1. Thank you guys for listening. For those of you who have recently revisited the movie, stay listening for part 2. And if you haven't seen the movie recently, go back, watch it, and then come back and listen to part 2.